The old manor house stood silently on the hill, its dark windows like empty eyes, staring out at the swirling snow. Inside, a small group of people had gathered for the weekend, seeking refuge from the harsh winter weather. There was Lord Henry, the owner of the manor, a stern and imposing figure, his wife, Lady Elizabeth, a beautiful but fragile woman, their two children, Edward and Alice, and a handful of servants. As the snow fell thicker outside, the atmosphere inside the manor grew increasingly tense. Lord Henry was brooding over a recent business deal that had gone sour. Lady Elizabeth was fretting about her upcoming social engagements, and the children were bored and restless. The servants, meanwhile, whispered amongst themselves about the strange noises they had been hearing in the night. One evening, as the guests were gathered for dinner, a sudden gust of wind rattled the windows and plunged the room into darkness. Candles were lit, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence. The guests rushed to the source of the scream, which led them to the library. There they found Lady Elizabeth lying on the floor, a dagger clutched in her chest. She was dead. The guests were shocked and horrified. Lord Henry immediately called for the servants to bring lamps and to secure the manor. He then declared that no one was to leave until the killer had been found. The guests were confined to their rooms, each one of them a suspect in Lady Elizabeth's murder. The atmosphere in the manor was thick with suspicion and fear. As the night wore on, the snow continued to fall and the wind howled outside. The guests huddled in their rooms, trying to stay warm and to make sense of what had happened. Edward and Alice were particularly frightened. They had never seen their mother so angry, and they couldn't understand why anyone would want to kill her. They clung to each other for comfort, whispering stories of ghosts and monsters. In the morning, Lord Henry gathered the guests in the drawing room. He announced that he had hired a detective to investigate Lady Elizabeth's murder. The detective, a shrewd and experienced man named Inspector Harris, arrived at the manor shortly thereafter. Inspector Harris questioned each of the guests carefully. Gathering information, he examined the crime scene, looking for clues. He even interviewed the servants, hoping to learn something that might help him solve the case. As the investigation progressed, Inspector Harris began to suspect that one of the guests was hiding a dark secret he pressed his questioning, and the guests grew increasingly uncomfortable. One by one, the guests' secrets were revealed. Lord Henry was having an affair with one of the servants. Lady Elizabeth was deeply in debt. Edward was secretly using his father's money to gamble, and Alice was hiding a forbidden love affair with a young man from the village. The revelations were shocking, but they also provided Inspector Harris with new leads. He began to focus his attention on the guests who had the most to gain from Lady Elizabeth's death. Finally, after days of investigation, Inspector Harris called the guests together in the drawing room. He announced that he had solved the case. The killer, he revealed, was none other than Lord Henry. He had been having an affair with one of the servants, and Lady Elizabeth had found out. She had threatened to expose him, and he had panicked and killed her. Lord Henry was arrested and taken away to jail. The other guests were relieved that the killer had finally been brought to justice, but they were also shaken by the events that had unfolded. The snow had finally stopped falling, and the sun was beginning to shine. The guests left the manor, eager to put the whole ordeal behind them. But they would never forget the weekend they had spent snowed in at the old manor house, the weekend when one of their own had committed murder. The manor house stood empty once again, its dark windows like empty eyes staring out at the world. The snow melted away, revealing the secrets that had been buried beneath it, and the guests who had survived the weekend would carry those secrets with them for the rest of their lives. The end.